Hello everyone, I welcome you back to another important lecture. And for today's class, we are going to be looking on toward a major aspect of the sexual reproduction in case of the human beings. And in that context, we be looking on toward the process of the fertilization and the post-fertilization events that happens within the female reproductive tract. So before I take you into be understanding the fertilization. The context that you have to be understanding is that since in us the reproduction that we have with us. So this is the sexual reproduction, and what we know is that in sexual reproduction there is involvement of the male parent, and on the other way around we have got the involvement of the opposing parent, and that is the female parent with us. And since both have to contribute in making of an offspring, so what the male parent would be doing is that it would be producing a gamete inside their testes, and that gamete, this is basically the sperm cell with us. On the other hand, the female parent that we have got, so in her ovaries, she would be producing another gamete, and that gamete, it would be the egg cell with us, and one set of the genetic material or one set of the chromosomes, this is lying in the sperm cell, and the other set of the chromosome, this is lying within the egg cell. So this is important that this sperm cell and the egg cell, which the male and the female parents they have made, so they need to be fusing with one another. Okay, and that fusion of the sperm cell and the egg cell is what we refer to this as the fertilization process, and we would see in detail that how come the mechanism of the fertilization looks like, and how do the post-fertilization events that would be occurring within the female reproductive tract. So the fertilization simply is when the nuclei that we have got in the sperm cell that is carrying the genetic information from the male parent, when this would be fusing with the egg cell that we have produced in the female reproductive tract. So this fusion of the male gamete and the female gamete is what we refer to this as the fertilization process. And for from the MCQ and the theory point of view, this is important for all of you to know that where is this fertilization actually occurring. So this fertilization would be taking place within the part of the female reproductive tract, and that we refer to this as the oviducts. Both the sperm cell that we have and the egg cell that we have, so they have got their own adaptations that basically allow them to account for the successful fertilization, and later we would be making the zygote and the embryo out of it. So if I was to tell you the mechanism of this, so the situation happening would be that the male parent and the female parent, they would be sexually aroused. The male parent, during the intercourse or the copulation process, he is going to insert his penile organ or the penis into this female's birth canal or the vaginal canal, and would deposit the semen in it. And that semen, it would have these sperm cells in it. And since the sperm cell has a tail in it, so it would cause the sperm cell to slide past the cervix, it would be crossing through the uterus, and then ultimately it would approach the egg cell that would be lying within the oviducts. And this egg cell that we have, this would be released from the ovaries that are the female gonads. What we need to be understanding is that what would be happening when this sperm cell, it would be coming in contact with the egg cell. So if I were to explain it with the help of the diagram, so what you have to be understanding is that the egg cell that we have made, so this has got a protective layer on the outside of it, and this protective layer is what we specifically regard this as the jelly coat. And on the other way around, if I were to come on the inside of the egg cell, so lying immediately below the jelly coat, what we have with us, so this would be referred to as the cell membrane. And when we would be coming to the center of the egg cell, so here we have got the female nuclei, and this female nuclei has the genetic material from the female parent. Now, on the other hand, what we have brought into the oviduct is this sperm cell, and the sperm cell has come from where? The male parent, right? And in this sperm cell, what we know is that we have got at the center, so this is the male nucleus, and this male nucleus again has got the haploid number of the chromosomes in it. So if I were to be making a zygote out of it, so that we can further be making an embryo or the baby out of it, it is important that the nuclei of the sperm cell it should fuse with the nuclei of the egg cell. But the issue is this jelly coat. Until or unless we do not digest or we do not break down the jelly coat, then the fusion of the male nucleus and the female nucleus, this cannot be done. So the solution for this is that within the head of the sperm, we have got this part, and this part is what we be referring to this as the acrosome, we say. And this acrosome has got some digestive enzymes in it, and those digestive enzymes are what we refer to them as the hydrolytic enzymes. So once the sperm cell has approached the egg cell, so this acrosome, it would release the digestive enzymes out of it, and those digestive enzymes, what they be doing is that they would be digesting the jelly coat of the egg cell. And when the jelly coat would be digested, so as a consequence of that, the head of the sperm cell, it would get an entry into the egg cell. And when this would be getting an entry into the egg cell, so as a consequence of that, the haploid nucleus that we have got within the sperm cell, it will fuse with the haploid nuclei of the egg cell, and as a consequence of that, we would be making a diploid cell out of it, and that diploid cell, it would be referred to as the zygote. So if I were to be simply reading the points in context of this so that you can remember it for the paper point of view. So here I simply elaborated to you the fertilization. So the points that you are required to be remembering is that the sperm cell, this has entered the oviducts of the female reproductive tract, like at this point. And in the oviducts, what we have with us, it was an egg cell. And afterward, the head of the sperm cell, when it fuses with the jelly coat of the egg cell, like this was a jelly coat with us. So the acrosome that was here in the head of the sperm cell, so this would release the hydrolytic enzymes. And these hydrolytic enzymes, what they would be doing is they would digest the part of the jelly coat, and when the part of the jelly coat would be digested, so it would cause the head to be entering into the egg cell. And over there, the male nucleus, it would fuse with the female nucleus. And as a result of that, what we have made out of it, that is a zygote. So the other point that we have to be remembering in terms of the fertilization is that why the fertilization has to happen. So what we know is that for the making of the human being, what we need is the 46th number of the chromosomes. Since the sperm cell, which is a haploid cell, and this is bringing half the number of the chromosomes from the male parent, and the other half chromosomes or one set of the chromosome we have got in the egg cell. So when they both would fuse during the process of fertilization, then we would be able to retain the 46th number of the chromosomes within the zygote. So this is why the fertilization is important. Now what we need to be looking is that okay fine, the fertilization has happened, then what would be the post fertilization event? So the idea is that we only want one sperm cell to be fusing egg cell so that the diploid number of the chromosomes must be retained, and more than one sperm cells would not be allowed to be fusing with the egg cell, because in that way the number of the chromosomes would get disturbed, and this is something we don't want. So in the post-fertilization events, this jelly coat that we have got, this would harden, and when this would harden, so the other sperm cells, they would not be able to be fusing with the egg cell that was previously fertilized by this sperm cell. The other thing is that since we have made the zygote, now we would like to be increasing its size so that we can be making it an embryo first, and later we would be converting it into the fetus. So if I were to take you to this specifically, that what happens after the fertilization. So the first point I have told you that the jelly coat has hardened and the other sperm cells would not be able to be fusing it. Now we need to be increasing the size of this zygote. And what we know is that if we want to increase the size of the zygote, then we need to be bringing about the mitosis. And when the mitosis would be happening, so this zygote that we have got, this would be making the two daughter cells, and those two daughter cells, they would be making the other two daughter cells. And in that way, we would be making a ball of the cell out of it. And that ball of the cell that we are making out of the mitotic divisions, so this is what we call this as the embryo. At this point, what we have to be remembering is that each of the daughter cell that we have made as a result of the mitosis, so this carries the same genetic material as a parent cell, and we would have 46 number of the chromosomes in all of the cells that we have within this ball, and this was the embryo with us. Now, what we need to be doing next is that we have to move this embryo out of the oviducts and we need to take it toward the uterus so that it can implant into it. Why do we need is that we want to further cause it to be growing its size, and we want it to be becoming more complex so that it can be developing the complex structures like the systems of the body. So we need to be bringing the implantation. So what would be happening at this point is that within the oviducts we have these ciliated cells, and these ciliated cells, they would be moving this embryo and would cause it to sink into the uterus. And for 2 to 3 days, this embryo would float within the uterus, and finally it would attach itself into the uterus of the female reproductive tract. And then at that point, we would say that the female has become pregnant. So if I were to simply read these points in terms of the post-fertilization events, so as I said, the zygote, it undergoes the mitotic divisions. And in those mitotic divisions, each of the parent cell that we have, so this would be forming the new daughter cells. And the new daughter cells that we are making, so it would have the same genetic material as its prior or previous parent cell. And the ball of the cell that we have made here, so this is referred to as the embryo. And later the embryo that we have formed, so this was moved with the help of the cilia cells or with the help of the peristalsis movement as well. And the embryo is moved toward the uterus. And the embryo, as I said earlier, that it would float for 2 to 3 days within the uterus, and ultimately it would later attach itself within the uterus, and that process would be referred to as the implantation. What implantation is, why implantation is important, we'll be looking it into the next lecture.